I never expected the dinner date with my new love to turn into a heartbreaking reunion. I will never forget the way my heart pounded that night, racing against a clock I could barely see. Cramped in the corner of a dimly lit restaurant, the air thick with uncertainty, I stirred my wine, hoping it would magically both calm me and fill the void forming in my chest. Eli had been my anchor, the steady hand guiding me through stormy seas, laughing as he made jokes about the universe and our utterly mundane lives. But tonight, as we shared the same breathless anticipation, I felt the dark shadow of something I couldn't grasp looming overhead. When the familiar clink of a glass cut through the noise, I turned to see a figure I never wanted to face again. There she was. Gina. The girl with the laughter like sunlight-piercing fog. The ghost of my past, flickering behind my eyes, now standing in front of our table, her expression etched with shock, harder than the granite I knew she could be. My heart ached, a deep, hollow pain mixed with the bitterness of memories flooding back like an unruly tide. Eli turned, sensing the abrupt shift in the world, his hand momentarily freezing above his half-eaten meal. The look on his face reflected confusion and curiosity, pulling me momentarily from the spiraling despair of the moment. The fabric of our perfect evening started to unravel, as conversations around us faded into murmurs and whispers. I couldn't breathe, my lungs constricted by an invisible weight. The restaurant seemed to shrink around us, the flickering candles whispered secrets, and the laughter of couples faded into the background. My mind raced to the past, Gina's fierce determination, the way her smile lit up even the darkest days. And yet, it left behind a shattering trail of resentment and love lost. Eli took a cautious step forward, glancing between me and Gina, as if he were trying to piece together the riddle before him. I saw his hands tremble slightly, the quiet strength he displayed shattering under the pressure of unanswered questions hanging in the air. "Do you two know each other?" he asked, voice steady yet laced with worry. The silence stretched, thick like a blanket of fog around us. I wanted to answer, to scream, to tell him everything and nothing at once. But the lump in my throat constricted further, choking the words that begged to be free. The shadows inside me stirred, readying for battle against the truth that had engulfed our lives, and then, in a twist of fate too cruel to be accidental, Gina opened her mouth. The words she spoke next would change everything. An unusual fact about her presence, a connection so unexpected, it shattered my fragile world all over again. "Hey, before we continue with this amazing story, I need to give you an important heads up. Many subscribers have reported that YouTube unsubscribed them without warning. Take a quick second to check the red button below to make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. I'd hate for you to miss any of the exclusive content coming soon. And while you're there, smash that like button, it really helps me out with the algorithm. Oh, and tell me in the comments, which city are you watching from? I love getting to know every amazing person who's part of this community. Your participation makes all the difference. Let's connect." The air in the restaurant crackled with an unbearable tension, the walls almost shaking with the weight of the unspoken words that laced between us. I felt the heat rise to my face, a mixture of anger and raw vulnerability. As though sensing my turmoil, Eli reached for my hand, his touch grounding yet somehow igniting a firestorm within me. Gina breathed heavily, her expression a complicated blend of regret and something that resembled determination. "I know this looks complicated," she began, her voice steady but her eyes darting between me and Eli. "But you need to hear me out." Against every fiber of my being, I was drawn to her vulnerability, as if our past trajectories were weaving a thread into the present. I snatched my hand away from Eli, feeling the chill of the air without him. "What are you doing here?" I forced out, the words edged with hurt and uncertainty. "That I came to find you," she said, crossing her arms defensively. "I needed to apologize. What happened, everything, it was a mistake." The murmurs of the restaurant patrons faded into a ghostly backdrop, my world narrowing down to the two of us and the invisible barrier thickening each second. Eli watched, confusion thick across his brow, and I could feel his unease shift toward frustration. "Find her?" he echoed, casting a glance back at me. "Live apologizing for the past? Isn't that just opening wounds that should have healed?" Gina shook her head, the memory of our shared laughter wrenching her features momentarily. "No, Eli, it's not like that. I know I hurt her, but I realized something important while we were apart. I was selfish. I never understood how deep I'd cut." Her eyes locked onto mine, pleading for understanding. "I just want to make things right." The shimmering illusion of the night dissolved as nostalgia clung to my heart like a stubborn shadow. I was not just speaking with Gina, I was grappling with the ghosts of my past, the choices made and the pain woven into every frayed edge of our shared history. With each breath, memories spiraled behind my eyelids, laughter shared, late-night debates about the stars, our dreams folding together like the chapters of an unfinished book. Yet intertwined with those moments was an undercurrent of betrayal that I couldn't shake. "What's changed?" I demanded, my voice steady despite the storm churning inside me. "Why now?" A flicker of pain crossed her face. "Because I've changed. I've seen things." Gina paused, visibly struggling with her emotions. "I want to be honest. After we drifted apart, I experienced something that made me reevaluate everything. I've been sick. My chest tightened, the word crashing against the walls I'd built. "What do you mean?" Eli shifted closer to me, his warmth and unwarranted comfort in this tempest. Gina hesitated, the fear of my reaction coiling around us like a noose. "I was diagnosed last year, stage 2 breast cancer. I was so consumed with trying to protect myself that I never realized the damage I'd done to you." As her confession hung in the air, an unexpected rush of pity seeped into my heart, mixing with anger and confusion. I wanted to recoil, to shield myself from the raw ache of our shared history, but I was not that person anymore. The vulnerability in her gaze mirrored my own anguish almost too closely. "Do you want pity, Gina? You were never shy of showing your true colors back then," I said sharply, the bitterness spilling over despite my reluctance to unleash it. Eli's hand snaked back to mine, offering a quiet solace. "But I'm not asking for pity," she insisted, voice stronger now. "I'm asking for a chance to atone, to rebuild some of what I broke." I still cared. In that moment, caught between the past and an uncertain present, I felt the ground shift beneath me. Ella's grip on my hand tightened, grounding me amidst the cyclone of emotions. As the seconds passed, I was acutely aware of the gaze of nearby diners, their judgment seeping into the fabric of our moment. I could feel their whispers peel back the layers of my memories, exposing every scar. "That I don't know if I can do this," I finally admitted, my voice a whisper tinged with despair. "We've both moved on, but this moment feels unfinished." Gina leaned closer, tears shimmering in her eyes. "But I have something that might help you decide." With that, she reached into her bag, pulling out a neatly folded piece of paper. "This was the last thing your mother wrote before she passed." My breath hitched, and I felt Ella's presence strengthen beside me. My mother had been my world, her unwavering love the compass that guided me through dark times. For Gina to have something, a piece of her to offer, felt like opening Pandora's box at the worst possible moment. "Your mother wanted you to have this," Gina Pokrokovala, trembling slightly. "I found it after." Her voice cracked, and for a fleeting moment, vulnerability swamped her bravado. "She loved you so much. She would have wanted you to know everything." The restaurant drifted into a blur, blurring the edges as I reached for the paper, my heart racing with anticipation and dread. Was it an apology? A confession? Or perhaps something I'd never imagined could exist, an elusive connection with my past? As I unfolded the paper, the words danced before my eyes, alive with a warmth that both soothed and frightened me. In that instant, I teetered on the edge of a revelation that could obliterate the world I had known, revealing truths I had buried deep within my soul, truths that might finally bring clarity to our intertwined destinies. The dim lights of the restaurant dimmed further, the world around me crystallizing into stark insignificance as I unfolded the fragile piece of paper. The tender scent of vanilla and spice that permeated the air faded into the background, replaced by the rapid thrum of my heartbeat as I read each delicate line in my mother's unmistakable handwriting. "To my dearest child," the letter began, and I could practically hear her voice echoing in my ears, warm and reassuring. A soft gasp escaped my lips, drawing the gaze of both Eli and Gina. But I was lost in the flow of words, the ink absorbing the essence of her love. That I am writing this in a moment of clarity, with the hope that one day you might read it and understand. Life is beautifully complex, and choices will both shape and shatter our paths. Forgive me for not being the mother you always deserved. I made mistakes, and I know it hurt you. But I want you to know that my love for you never wavered. With each syllable, emotions flooded through me. I thought of all the times I had blamed her for the void in my life, for the gaping hole left by her absence. And yet, here she was speaking to me from beyond the grave, reaching out like a lighthouse in a storm. I am proud of you, the letter continued. Even in your struggles, remember that the strength I see in you came from me, too. I want you to embrace love freely and not let fear hold you back, not from the ones you cherish nor yourself. It's the only way to heal. The tears I tried so hard to hold back now fell unbridled, blistering paths down my cheeks. The grip of Eli's warm hand around mine was a lifeline, grounding me as the weight of my mother's words enveloped me. And yet, as their meaning washed over me, a bitter pang twisted in my chest, a sudden awareness that her absence echoing through my past had also shaped my present. That I glanced up from the letter to Gina, bewilderment mixing with the complexities of anger and sympathy. You found this? I choked, scarcely able to process the enormity of her gesture. Gina nodded, her own eyes shimmering with unshed tears as she seemed to grapple with the depths of regret. When I learned about your mother, I had to search for something I could give you. Something to say I'm sorry, she said softly. It feels inadequate, but it's all I had. Eli's expression was a whirlwind of confusion and compassion, glancing between Gina and the letter. Are you telling me that despite everything, she sought reconciliation too? He asked, his voice low as if afraid to disturb the fragile air between us. Yes, I managed, my heart racing as I held on to each word as a beacon of possibility. But I don't know what to do with this. The honesty of Ella's presence at my side began to forge a path through the maze of emotions. This moment felt like a crossroads. One path led to nostalgia and pain, while the other might carry hope and healing, though it terrified me to contemplate. In the swirl of these possibilities, I couldn't decipher where Gina stood. You came here to apologize, but turning over your guilt doesn't lessen what you've done, I said. Does the pain of your actions haunt you enough to make up for everything, or is it simply the chaos of your own illness that drives you? I'm not running from my past, Lila, Gina replied, sincerity in her voice. I realize now the pain I caused. I hope to make amends, to find some kind of closure for both of you. My heart twisted with the weight of her words, the burden of grace that hadn't been asked for and yet lingered in the air like a warm summer breeze. Would my acceptance of her apology only complicate things further? With the air thickening with unresolved feelings, I began to feel lightheaded, a sense of fear creeping in that perhaps I was falling back into the patterns of the past. My mother's touch on my soul anchored me, yet the thought of embracing Gina was unsettling after all we'd encountered together. In that moment, the world shifted again when the door of the restaurant swung open, allowing a gust of frigid air to rush inside. A figure stepped through. A woman clutching a baby, her face pale and drawn as if she had just escaped from a nightmare. Gina. She called, frantic recognition storming her features. My heart stumbled at the sound, the woman's gaze darting between us as her panic surged. Where have you been? I thought you were gone for good. Her voice cracked, breathless. Gina's eyes widened, the tension from our earlier confrontation forgotten as she took a hesitant step toward this newcomer. What are you doing here? The atmosphere charged with a new urgency. I could feel the tension coil tightly in the air, blooming into an unexpected storm as this revelation threatened to pull our fragile moments apart. As fear coursed through me like ice water, I couldn't shake the feeling that everything was about to shift again, that this was only the beginning of a much larger reckoning. The pale woman with the baby stepped closer, her eyes glistening with a mix of anxiety and relief. I've been looking everywhere for you, Gina. I can't believe you're here. With every word she spoke, my heart raced faster, intertwining itself with the anxiety that seemed to envelop the table. There was something familiar about her, a distant echo from a past I hadn't lived but felt connected to somehow. The baby, nestled in her arms, squirmed as she clutched the soft blanket tighter around him, shielding him from the commotion of the crowded restaurant, oblivious to the storm brewing around them. "What do you mean, looking for me?" Gina's voice was caught somewhere between confusion and concern, a delicate tremor threading through her words. The woman inhaled sharply, and I could see the threads of desperation pulling at her composure. "I told you I needed your help. Ever since everything happened, I've been alone. I thought I lost you. People are asking questions, and I can't do this by myself," she pleaded. Eli shifted nervously next to me, his hand still holding mine as if he could anchor me against the whirlwind of emotions swirling about. I could sense his uncertainty mirroring my own, a palpable tension that made our table feel like it was teetering on the brink of something monumental. "Lila, this is Sophie," Gina said slowly, her gaze flicking back to me with an unusual intensity. She was my friend. We went through a lot together." The mention of friendship felt hollow as I absorbed the scene unfolding before me. I couldn't forget the bitterness that had characterized Gina's relationship with her past, the darkness cloaked in her decisions which had previously kept me at a distance. Yet here was Sophie, holding a story I barely understood, yet I could sense the weight it carried. That I cleared my throat, but my voice seemed foreign in my own mouth. "What do you mean, people are asking questions?" Sophie's breath hitched as her eyes darted around, seemingly afraid of unseen observers lurking in the corners. "They know about the baby," she whispered, her voice almost drowned out by the clattering of dishes around us. "They're starting to connect the dots. It's dangerous, and I can't keep him safe without you. I need your help." The gravity of her words anchored me, and for a fleeting moment, I forgot the heaviness lingering between me and Gina. Instead, I was pulled into the realm of maternal instinct as I locked eyes with the baby, the innocent gaze brimming with trust and vulnerability. There was something purely heartbreaking about the life nestled within Sophie's embrace, a fragile hope that hung in the balance. Gina's expression shifted sharply, the mask she'd worn to shield herself from the past beginning to crack. "What do you want me to do?" Her voice trembled, layered with reluctance, yet infused with the slightest hint of determination. Sophie stepped closer, urgency fueling her every movement. "You know what I'm asking. You have the resources, you can help me disappear, at least until this all blows over. We can't just let them find us. Not now." "I can't," Gina whispered, a deep resignation saturating her voice. "Not again. I don't want to go back to that life, Gina." Sophie implored, desperation flooding her tone. "You've been through it. We can figure this out together like we used to. Please." The tension at our table escalated, weaving a web of unspoken truths between me, Eli, Gina, and Sophie. I felt like an outsider, watching two women bound by shared trauma, grappling with their past choices and their desperate future. There was anger, fear, but also a flicker of loyalty that tied them together, reigning in their resolve to forge a path through the chaos. Eli squeezed my hand, grounding me momentarily. "Maybe we should leave," he whispered, concern lacing his voice. But I found myself captivated within the turmoil of the moment, unable to abandon the thread that had drawn me into their world. As Sophie turned her gaze toward me for confirmation, seeking support I wasn't sure I could provide, I felt the encroaching dread of uncertainty wrap around my heart. My own feelings seemed to be spiraling into a realm I had not voluntarily chosen, nudging me to confront not just my past, but the turbulence of Gina's and Sophie's fateful bond as well. "Lila, can you help me?" Sophie asked, her voice a desperate whisper, eyes filled with a mixture of hope and dread. "I know it's a lot to ask, but you have the strength I don't. You could make a difference for us, for him." That I opened my mouth to respond, but a sudden wave of nausea surged through me as shadows danced across Gina's face, darkening the moment with the weight of unspoken fears. I sensed that the answers I was looking for were forever suspended in the chaos, a reminder that even as we fought to move forward, the ties that bound us to our pasts were not easily severed, and in that charged moment, a familiar uncertainty surged back into my chest, threatening to pull me under once again. What was I truly willing to sacrifice for those I barely understood? The flicker of hope I felt was suspiciously intertwined with fear, closing around me like a vice. And just as I was about to speak, a loud crash of glass shattered on the other side of the restaurant, drawing all attention toward a dark figure stumbling through the door, panting heavily as his eyes scanned the room. Before I could fathom what this new development meant, I felt a cold chill run down my spine, intertwining with the tension thickening the air. My heart raced. The unexpected shift had begun, and I braced myself for whatever was to come next. The figure paused, silhouetted against the brightly lit signs of the restaurant, only illuminated dimly by the fading daylight outside. He was disheveled, his clothes rumpled and stained, and a look of sheer desperation painted across his features. I instinctively leaned towards Eli, seeking refuge in his presence. As uncertainty clouded my thoughts, time seemed to freeze as the man searched the room, and I felt the collective breath of diners hitch in anticipation. The atmosphere had shifted from chaotic whispers to a focused stillness, all eyes drawn to him, awaiting whatever revelation was poised to unfold. When his gaze finally landed on our table, I recognized the intensity that sparked within his eyes. A flicker of recognition sent an icy shiver down my spine. I hadn't seen him in years, yet here he was, as if the universe had summoned him as a specter of my past. "Josh, me first love. Lila." He gasped, stumbling forward, his voice laden with disbelief. "Is that really you?" Gina's expression was a cocktail of emotions as she glanced between me and Josh, confusion and worry warping her features. Sophie, however, visibly paled, tightening her grip around the baby as if shielding him from a ghost that had suddenly materialized into their lives. It was as if the past had merged with the present in the most bewildering manner possible. "Josh," I managed to choke out, my heart racing as memories clashed within me, tripping over one another like children in a playground. The good and the bad surged forward, vying for dominance in my mind. He used to be my whispered dreams, my safety net, yet he was woven into the very fabric of the life I had chosen to leave behind. His eyes were wide with worry and unreadable intent. "I came to find you," he said, urgency lacing every syllable. "Things have gone terribly wrong. I thought you should know." Sophie stepped protectively in front of the baby, instinctively maintaining a distance as if she could sense the dark tide of danger rolling in. "You need to leave," she urged with a quiver in her voice. "They're looking for you too." The air in the restaurant thickened, weighted by unspoken fears and the jagged edges of the unhealed past. I glanced at Gina, her eyes flared as if struck by a bolt of turmoil. "What do you mean, they're looking for you?" Gina's voice rose above the murmur of whispers coiling through the restaurant. Before Josh could respond, the crash sound of glass breaking erupted again, this time closer, causing customers to recoil and several to rise from their seats. Dread filled my chest as I turned to see two stern-faced men entering, their gazes scanning the room with predatory intensity. They looked as though they belonged in dark alleys rather than among families enjoying a quiet meal. "Find him," one of them ordered, voice low and gravelly, making the hairs on my neck stand on end. "And the baby." The mood shifted abruptly, the restaurant's chatter transitioned into a flickering panic as dining patrons began to rise, some pushing away their chairs in hasty retreat. Ellis' grip tightened on my hand, his earlier uncertainty immediately replaced with protectiveness. "We need to get out of here," he urged, pulling me close. But all I could manage was a bewildered gasp, locked in a confrontation between the ghosts haunting my past and the immediate threat looming before us. "What did you get involved in, Josh?" I asked, my voice steady despite the confusion swirling like a violent storm inside me. "What did you bring back with you?" Josh turned pale, his eyes darting nervously toward the entrance where the two men lingered, purposeful and deliberate. "There's no time," he murmured, his voice low and urgent. "If they find May brought you both into this, I can't let them get to you. But you need to trust me." That I felt the weight of his words, heavy and thick in the air. Trust. It dripped with the bitterness of betrayal. Years of separation had taught me how precarious trust could be. And yet, with the looming threat marrying itself to our reality, I felt my heart thump with reckless hope. Could I follow him again into uncertainty? But before I could respond, a voice broke through the rising tension. Gina, mouthing a frantic warning. "Lila. We have to go now." With that single utterance, it was as if the world around me tilted, the ground beneath me shifted, and I was caught in an emotional whirlwind. Voices blended into a cacophony, fear surged like water rising against a dam, and in that moment, a choice was demanded of me, a choice that could fracture the fragile threads of devotion I barely understood. As I turned towards the entrance, a glint of steel caught my eye. My heart raced, and I felt the urge to flee. But then I glanced at the baby in Sophie's arms, the innocent gaze filled with helpless trust, and suddenly everything shifted into stark clarity. In the chaos of racing hearts and desperate souls seeking refuge, one undeniable truth blossomed amid the calamity: how far was I willing to go to save the ones I unintentionally brought into my life once again? And then, just as I was about to take a step towards safety, the door swung open again, and a figure stepped in, a woman with a determined look, her eyes fixed on Josh, startling recognition drawing lines across her face. "There you are. I thought I'd lost you." My heart sank, the room exploding into new questions and fears as we found ourselves caught in this inescapable web of unforeseen terror. With the burden of my choices weighing heavily on my shoulders, I felt the world tilt precariously anew, whispering that this reunion would change everything once again. The moment hung in the air, suspended by the chaos that whirled around us. The doors had barely closed behind the woman, yet I could feel the collective heartbeat of the room quicken, a pulse of desperation and alarm that thrummed through the soles of my feet. "Zara?" Josh's voice broke as he stepped back, disbelief washing over him. There stood the woman who had once shared his dreams, an echo from years gone by. I recognized the tremor in his voice, the way his body turned taut, as if a thread binding him to that past was drawn tight. Gina's eyes flared with astonishment, and Sophie's grip on the baby tightened, as if sensing the shift in the electric tension. The room held its breath, a silent flight from the anxieties swirling like storm clouds overhead. "What are you doing here?" Josh's tone was laced with urgency, a plea echoing in his voice as he took a tentative step forward. "You shouldn't have come, that I had to," Zara replied fiercely, her gaze darting around the restaurant, taking in the atmosphere thick with dread. "You were supposed to be safe. I thought you were in hiding." It was as if the world shrank around us, the roiling chaos of the restaurant fading into the background. My heart raced, layers of history unfurled before me, filled with whispers of heartbreak and unspoken bonds. Questions collided in my mind: who was this woman who dared to pull Josh from the shadows? And why did she care? "I am safe," he countered, but his voice lacked the confidence he struggled to project, the underlying fear threading through his words betraying a dark reality. Amid the cacophony, Eli pulled me closer, his breath hot against my ear, whispering, "We need to move now." He was right. I could feel the tension thickening like fog, making it nearly impossible to see beyond our immediate circle of distress, but as I turned to escape, I felt a tug deep within, a nagging connection to Josh and the specter of a past that had lived on in the crevices of my heart. I couldn't abandon him, not after he had risked everything to find me. Before I could articulate any intention to stay, the first of the two men stepped forward, his eyes like dark stones, cold and razor-sharp. "You're coming with us, Josh," he barked, the gravel in his tone heavy with menace. "No more running. No more games." The realization slammed into me like a wall, crumbling any fragmented notion of escape. My instincts shouted at me to protect my newfound family, Gina and Sophie, with their fragile life intertwined in the chaos of my past. But my heart twisted with the thought of leaving Josh to face these men alone. "Wait." I blurted out, panic clenching my throat. "You can't just take him. He hasn't done anything." Those words hung in the air as they seeped out of me, pure instinct driven by a blend of desperation and something I couldn't yet label as affection. The men turned their gazes toward me, and for an agonizing moment, a stillness enveloped the chaos, as if I had just dared a wild beast to move. "Step aside, little girl," the second man droned, his voice dipped in condescension as he folded his arms, his demeanor dismissive and dangerous. "Lila, don't," Josh said, his expression a storm of fear and regret. "This isn't your fight." But it was, and with every ounce of resolve I could muster, I felt something blossom within me, desire to shield them all, to stand against the tide that threatened to sweep us away. "No. He's not alone, I won't let you take him." In that moment, I felt a sudden weight shift, a collective realization setting in. The strangers from our past were no longer separate concerns, we were entangled, captives of our previous choices and future uncertainties. Zara swiveled towards me, her eyes searching. "You need to help him," she urged vehemently. "If they take him, they will come after you too." Inexplicably, a flickering light of understanding sparked between USA's shared bond over shared fears. Maybe this reunion wasn't just about Josh, maybe it was about finding common ground in the chaos we shared. Ellis' grip on my shoulder tightened, drawing me back as he, too, recognized the alarm growing among the men. "Lila, listen to me. We have to go," but as if sensing we didn't plan to be passive victims any longer, the two men exchanged a knowing glance, anticipation etched into their lips. Time twisted and distorted, the atmosphere crackling with raw energy. Fear bubbled within, yet the desire to chart our course overwhelmed it. Just then, one of the men reached for his waistband, pulling out something glinting sharply in the light. "This is your last chance, Josh. No more games." The dinner crowd fluctuated between panic and deadly stillness. I felt my heart plummet then soar as countless emotions swirled. Time stretched, and every breath felt pivotal as we stood at the precipice of action. Could we turn the tide together? And then, painfully, a revelation hit me hard, one I never expected. In the middle of this whirlwind of chaos, my past, my relationship with Josh, and this new reality were tangled far more tightly than I could have ever imagined. Just as I began to grasp the full weight of it, a distant siren echoed from the street outside, rippling through the air. Hope danced in the forefront of my mind, a flicker in the darkness, urging me to hold on to it tightly. We'd need every ounce of light we could find, and as we continued to stand frozen against the threatening storm of reconciliation and danger, the building tension ignited. One moment encased in uncertainty could redefine everything I believed. What lay on the other side of this reckoning? Only time would tell, as shadows convened. The air thickened with tension, a predatory stillness that shifted as the distant wail of sirens grew louder, drawing closer, promising an escape or perhaps a more harrowing fate. My pulse quickened, an erratic drum underscored the noise of the chaos around us. I glanced around, searching for an exit, for an opening. The world outside our fears seemed simultaneously vast and impossibly constricted. "Grab the baby," Eli whispered urgently, his eyes darting around for any opportunity. Sophie nodded, her brow furrowed with worry as she clutched the infant tightly against her. That moment, I could see the resolve hardening in her expression. There was a strength in her fragility, and I felt a swell of admiration. Despite the fear threatening to unravel us, she was holding on to something deep, something powerful enough to keep her grounded. "Please, don't." Josh's voice brought us back to the present and the grim reality of our situation. "Let her go, don't hurt her." It was a plea I couldn't ignore, an unbroken tether of connection that bound us. My heart tightened. This man, this fractured piece of my past, seemed to transcend our present danger. The sweetness of our once shared laughter had disintegrated into the air between us, replaced with flashes of regret and unresolved emotions. Zara, still anchored in our disbelief, stepped closer to Josh, her fierce determination almost palpable. "You don't understand. They'll find you, they always do. Then we run. Together." I suddenly shouted, the words erupting from deep within, a rebellion against the very fear that sought to paralyze us. Silence fell like a heavy blanket, even the murmurs of the bystanders ceased, and our collective breaths echoed in the air. The men shifted, their expressions hardened with malicious intent, but that single volatile heartbeat of rebellion pierced through the growing dread. "What are you going to do?" The second man scoffed, raising his weapon. The glint of metal drew my eyes, each reflection that bounced off the surface sending shards of panic through my core. In that moment, time split into possibilities. I had already lost so much, could I bear to lose more? My mind darted back to a few days earlier when life had felt deceptively normal. Eli and I were searching for baby names, imagining the future, painting over the shadows of our past. It was fleeting, yet those moments danced vibrantly against the dark backdrop of uncertainty that loomed over us now. "Together." I shouted again, finding my footing as a sense of a united front blossomed between us. The knowledge that I wasn't alone, that even in this chaos, we could be each other's salvation filled me with unexpected courage. but it wasn't merely a romantic impulse twisting in my chest, it was a survival instinct surging through our connected stories. If we stuck together, we would have a chance, however slim. Ellis' grip loosened and his eyes moved to mine, pleading, understanding. On three, he whispered, his voice barely a thread above the bustling threat surrounding us. What are you planning? Josh asked, his voice tense with fear, desperation woven deeply into his tone. I don't know, yet, Eli said, but we're going to get you out of here, Lila, don't. Josh's plea trailed off as the men stepped forward, massing like dark clouds ready to burst. And then, as if the universe granted us a fleeting moment of grace, the door to the restaurant flung open, flooding the dim light with the glow of flashing red and blue lights. A handful of officers surged in, drawn by the impending chaos, fully prepared to challenge our captors. Get on the ground. One of them shouted, and suddenly the air vibrated with the severity of the situation as the men recoiled, confusion rippling through their ranks. Run! I cried, not fully comprehending the sources of authority around us until I felt a surge of bodies racing past, and Eli pulled Sophie and me behind him, ushering us toward the chaos of the entrance. Josh! I shouted, turning back for him, but fear clamped around my chest like a vice as our eyes met, a silent message rippling between us. Maybe. This wasn't the end, perhaps this could be a new beginning, woven with uncertainty, yet threaded with hope, but as our feet propelled us forward, a shot rang out, echoing through the air with a sickening clarity. The world slowed. Josh stumbled, and I could have swore I saw his face crumple for a heartbeat that felt like a lifetime. No! I screamed, our past crashing back into the present, a jagged reminder of everything I held dear suddenly fracturing before me. My heart shrieked with anguish and terror as I fought against Ellis' hold, desperate to push past the crowd, yearning to reach him, but the world had exploded, engulfed in a tempest of chaos, and in that second, in the fiercely bright lights flashing around the room, I could only grasp the end of one thread, the perilous unveiling of revelations that may come crashing down in the aftermath. As fear locked my limbs in place, I realized my fight was woven through this very moment, and our stories, his, mine, and everyone else, would no longer exist in silos, they had forever intertwined. The sirens blared like a funeral wail at the dawning of a new chapter, one that would either unite us or tear us apart, a painful realization that life will never let us go without demanding a heavy price. The chaos erupted in a frantic whirl, and confusion clawed at the edges of my sanity. I fought against the pull of Eli's protective grasp, a prisoner to the catastrophe unfolding before me. Each beat of my heart resonated with the rough cadence of panic, while the world tilted dangerously as I turned back toward Josh. The shot that had echoed through the air hung sulkily in the atmosphere, thickening the tension, creating a harrowing pause where hope flickered like a dying flame. My mind raced, a loop playing out in relentless succession. I had to reach him. I had to save him. Beneath the din, a soft, almost surreal fragment of recollection wrapped around my heart, a memory of Josh and me stealing kisses beneath the stars, lost in our tiny bubble of bliss. Lila. We have to go. Eli's voice cut through the fog of despair, but it felt distant, as though he stood on the verge of a new reality, while I remained anchored to the remnants of our past. As I gazed at Josh, now pressing a hand against his chest, his features were twisted in a Gonya-mirrored reflection of my own inner turmoil. We shared more than a history, we bore the weight of unconfessed words and unfinished stories. In that moment, as our eyes locked, I felt a visceral connection to all that was still unresolved, all I hadn't said since I'd walked away. But the onward momentum of the world wouldn't wait, lives hung in the balance, and I could sense the seeping fear around me. I turned back toward Eli, his face a mask of concern. The sirens howled closer, a reminder that help was at hand, but what could it truly offer if Josh needed me now? Go. Josh shouted, the urgency coloring his words with desperation. It'll be fine. Just go. The intensity of his voice snapped through my hesitation. I felt Eli's hand tighten around my arm, pulling me away while my instincts fought against letting Josh slip into the abyss alone. I hesitated, torn between defiance and a mantle of duty forced upon me. As we stumbled out into the street, the adrenaline and terror melded with the biting cold night air. The blaring lights painted everything in shades of urgency, and I felt the raw energy of life pulsing around us as officers scrambled, uniforms swarming toward the calamity we barely escaped. "Lila, we need to get to safety." Eli insisted again, more forcefully this time, but with a gentleness that kept me from shattering completely, but I couldn't leave him behind. I glanced over my shoulder, my heart thundering in my ears. In that brief moment, reality twisted in unimaginable ways. I saw the officers wrestling one of the assailants to the ground, their training taking over as they pinned him down. How could the world continue as I just witnessed the fragile thread of life, of love, unspooling right before my eyes? "I can't," I whispered hoarsely, a plea that trembled between us. "Lila," Ellis' voice softened, enlisting a tender resolve amidst the turmoil. "We can't do anything from here. We need to regroup, to figure out what to do next. Josh wouldn't want you in danger." His words coiled around me, whispering reason into the chaos, yet I felt the weight of my choices bearing down as a cold resolve hardened in my gut. And yet, even in my grief, a flicker of hope kindled somewhere deep. Hope that Josh hadn't been lost, that there was still ground left to cover, stories to tell. Suddenly, a commotion rang out behind us. The crowd surged closer, voices rising in fearful anticipation. My breath caught as I turned back, just in time to see another figure being escorted out by the officers, a flash of familiar features amid the melee. "Josh!" I gasped, a hot wave of relief washing over me, yet mingled with confusion. Was he injured? Had they moved him? My heart raced as the revelation of two conflicting realities twisted together. Josh was alive, yet that didn't necessarily mean he was safe. I charged back toward the scene, my feet moving before doubt could tether me down. Eli called my name, but the sound faded into the cacophony as I pressed forward, guided by unyielding impulses. The police formed a barrier, and I pushed my way through to find him. I had to see him, to assure myself of his existence. A heavy-set officer stood guard next to Josh, whose face now glistened with sweat, his brows furrowed in pain. The urgency of his situation struck me anew. This reunion was built on the precipice of something fragile and real. "Lila," he said, gasping, yet relief flooded through as our eyes momentarily locked again. The weight of unfinished words swirled around us like a tempest. "I'm so sorry," but before he could utter another syllable, he stumbled back, and as he did, the world shifted yet again. The officer steadied him, but Joshua grew gray around the edges, his breathing shallow. "Get back." The officer barked at me, shunning me from his side. "You need to stay behind the line." The barriers between us felt insurmountable, an invisible wall born from fears and frames that had held our love hostage for too long. I couldn't push through, but all I could do was stare, the haunting echo of his words brushing against the wounds that had only just begun to heal. Then, amidst the chaos, a voice startled us all. A woman stepped forward, her eyes deceptively placid, glinting with unspoken knowledge as she surveyed the scene. Without warning, she pointed directly at Eli, her mouth breaking into a cryptic smile. "Find out who you can trust. Not everyone is who they seem." The world around me shrank, constricting under the sheer weight of her words, filling me with a chilling notion that what I once knew could never truly prepare me for what was yet to come. The ties that bound our fragmented lives began to unravel before my eyes, and with it came the realization betrayal loomed on the horizon, ready to rise and sweep us all under its murky depths. "Lila." Ellis' panic drew me back to the urgent moment and out of the pointed revelation, while the sirens echoed ominously in the distance, and the gears of fate clicked into motion. One thing was clear, nothing would ever be the same again. I stumbled back into the chaos, the woman's words echoing in my mind like a thunderclap. Not everyone is who they seem. The weight of the unknown clung to my chest, squeezing the breath from my lungs as reality twisted around me. Eli's urgent grip tugged me away, guiding me back into the thrumming heart of confusion and uncertainty. "Lila, we need to move." Eli insisted, his voice growing more insistent. But the pulse of worry thrummed in my veins louder than his urgency. Head stepped into my world without fully grasping the fractures that ran through it. The connection I shared with Josh was an intangible thread, frayed but still holding on. I could feel it pulling me back toward him, as if by some strange force of destiny. "Eli, wait." I called, yanking my arm free from his hand. Without hesitation, I forged ahead, determined to find my way back to Josh. Each breath I took wavered with uncertainty. The energy around me felt labyrinthine, a swirling storm of emotions that threatened to engulf my fragile resolve. I needed to make sense of what was happening, and more importantly, I needed to know if Josh was truly okay. That I dodged officers and civilians alike, eyes scanning the scene for any sign of him. In the crowd's murmur, all I could hear was the echo of my heart drumming painfully, relentlessly against the wall of fear that had settled deep in my gut. Then I saw him again, crumpled beside an officer who was speaking urgently into a radio. The once familiar curve of Josh's smile now felt impossibly distant, replaced instead with the pallor of distress. "Josh!" I shouted, my voice rising above the chaos. I ran forward, my feet carrying me faster than my thoughts could catch up. I had to reach him, to draw him back into the light of our tangled histories, but then another officer stepped in front of me, a wall of stern authority that barred my way. "You need to stay back, miss." He barked, his eyes sharp and intense. I felt small, just a girl tethered to the consuming uncertainty of a life lived in shadows. "Please," I pleaded, desperation leaking into every word. "He needs me." That I wrung my hands, my heart a tempest as I fought against the impulse to push past him. Just then, Josh's gaze flickered through the crowd, locking onto me, a mixture of pain and gratitude woven into his expression, igniting the embers of hope within me. "Lila!" he croaked, the sound barely a whisper, but it reached into me, stirring a flood of memories. I thought back to our laughter that once filled the voids, our late-night conversations underneath the stars, the dreams we'd shared, all now threatened by a hostile reality. The officer finally relented slightly, backing away just enough for me to inch closer. "Josh, are you okay?" I asked, my voice shaking with worry as I hovered beside him, just outside the perimeter set by the officers. He gasped for breath, his face a medley of emotions, grief and relief commingling as the truth hung between us. "Lila," before he could finish, a sudden eruption of panic surged through the crowd, a ripple of confusion crashing over us all. "Get down!" a voice shouted amidst the uproar, and it took only an instant for everyone to respond. Bodies surged toward one another, the air humming with fear as everyone scrambled for cover. "Eli!" I shouted instinctively, feeling the tightening of his presence behind me as he shielded me from the chaos. "We have to help them," I said. "Stay down." Eli bellowed, yanking me closer. The intensity of his voice sent shivers spiraling down my spine, yet my eyes only remained locked on Josh, struggling against the tide of panic. Another officer was attempting to stabilize him, pressing gauze to a wound visible along the hem of his shirt. The sight made my stomach churn. "You don't understand," Josh rasped with urgency as I drew closer. "I can't let you." Then, into the flurry of voices, a familiar face emerged, its familiarity punctuated by shock. It was Maya, a figure from my past I hadn't expected to see again here, her eyes wide with disbelief as she scanned the chaos for familiar faces. "Lila! Josh!" she shouted, her voice a lifeline, cutting through the noise like a sliver of light in the storm. But as she stepped forward, her expression shifted from worry to something darker, as if the sight of us together had ignited an unease buried within her. "Get away from him, Lila!" she warned, her eyes darting back towards the police line. The suddenness of her words froze me in place, confusion threading itself tightly around my chest. "You don't know who he is or what he's done. You can't trust him." In that fragmented moment, time stretched, palpable tension simmering between us. Every layer of past and present clawed to surface in my mind, the girl who had been my friend, the one choice I made to step away, and the undeniable bond one still felt toward Josh. My heart raced, conflicted. "What do you mean, Maya?" But before she could respond, another wave of urgency bracketed us in. I could see Josh's expression shift from panic to resolve. The pieces of the puzzle felt distorted, twisted into a new shape that threatened to unravel everything I thought I knew. All at once, the world tipped dangerously again, the sirens growing in volume while the murmurs among us swelled. "Listen. Lila, you have to believe me," Josh whispered, voice strained. Am not who they think I am. As the realization sank in, the fragility of my reality crashed against the shore, leaving me wrestling with an impending truth as shadows lengthened over us all. The sirens blared in the distance, but all I could focus on was this moment and everything unraveling, everything that had kept us apart beginning to burgeon with urgency once more. Trust me, he breathed, and if I could just believe him, perhaps we might salvage what remained of us. But with Maya's warning looming on the periphery and my heart in disarray, I knew nothing would ever be the same again. A reckoning was upon us, darkness creeping in, and the moment of revelation crashed like waves against the shore of our lives, threatening to pull us all into unfathomable depths. As the tension coiled tighter around us, I could feel the chaos of the moment rising like a tempest, pulling each thread of my past and present into a jumbled knot. The officers, the flashing lights, the panicked crowd, they blurred together, a swirling vortex of noise and desperation that faded into the background as I blinked at Josh. His words hung heavy in the air, rippling through my memories like echoes of laughter that turned to whispers of doubt and betrayal. "Am not who they think I am," he reiterated, his voice a soft plea that cut through the chaos. I wanted to believe him. Part of me longed to reach back to the innocence of our shared memories, the weight of our young love. But the warning in Maya's eyes loomed large, a dark specter against the sunlight of our history. Each passing second felt eternal, filled with unsaid confessions and a raw honesty that bore a pinprick of light amidst the confusion. My heart raced as I glanced between Josh and Maya, trying to decipher what shadows danced behind her worried gaze. "What are you saying?" I managed, my voice shaking slightly as I held onto the fragile crux of hope. "Just trust me. They're after me for something I didn't do," he said, and the sincerity in his eyes ignited a flicker of belief deep inside me. I'd been forged in the fire of loss and pain. I knew what it felt like to be trapped by the past. If there was a chance to understand, a chance to forgive, I had to confront the specters of betrayal head-on, both his and mine. With urgency pulsing through my veins, I floated toward him, scrutinizing every minute detail of his expression, searching for the truth in the depths of his gaze. "Then let me help you," I whispered, my heart wrestling against all the years of hurt, against the weight of disillusionment that lay nestled beneath the surface. That he hesitated for just a heartbeat, and in that moment, the flicker of vulnerability slid over his features. "Lila, they're tied to my past. I can't bring you into this." But it was too late. The thread was already tangled, binding us together in a shared history that begged to be unraveled, despite the risks and dangers that loomed overhead. I could see it now. The chains we had crafted in our youthful naivete were heavier than I'd ever understood, pulling against us in a tight embrace that wouldn't let go. "That I don't care," I said, my voice rising above the noise. "You don't get to make that decision for me, Josh. You didn't back then, and you sure as hell don't get to now." The connection between us throbbed, and the chaos roared around us, but I felt anchored. Whether he understood his past or not, I couldn't turn away again. This moment was pivotal, a crescendo of uncertainty that only elevated the stakes, tying us together yet again. I braced against the undercurrent of fear flooding the room, prepared to confront the dark tide that threatened to drown us both. Before Josh could respond, before any of us could move, Maya marched forward, her determination cut through the tension like a knife. "Lila," she said, her voice unwavering despite the panic swirling around us. "You don't understand. The people he's with, they're dangerous. He's been running his whole life. If you associate with him," she trailed off, the weight of her concern hanging heavily in the air. "Let me decide my own path," I replied, forcing each word past the turmoil bottled up within me. I didn't need an enforcer in my life anymore, not even one who had once stood sincerely by my side. "Do you really trust him?" she pressed, her eyes searching mine desperately, yet I could see snippets of uncertainty flashing behind her brave front. After everything, in that moment, clarity struck. Trust was a delicate flower, blooming amidst a jungle of dark thorns. My heart raced as I wrestled with the remnants of unexpected loyalty buried deep within. "This isn't only about trust anymore, Maya. It's about who we were and who we can still become," I countered, my voice trembling but steady, a slow steadiness that resonated through the tumult of emotions swirling around us. The faint sigh of the wind accompanied the lingering whispers, and as my gaze locked into Josh's, I could almost taste the bittersweet nature of that unresolved past. Maybe we were naive to think we could outrun it, but the blood that tied us to anguish also braided something beautiful. Hope. Before I could speak again, a sudden commotion drew my eyes back to the front. The men who'd entered the restaurant earlier had slipped further into the crowd, their expressions sharp with intent. They seemed to converge on Josh with dark purpose, and I could see chaos brewing behind their eyes. It felt like an awakening of darker memories and painful legacies colliding against the flash of police lights. Move! Eli shouted. We can't stay here. Gathering my resolve, I turned to Josh again, urgency curling about my heart. I could see it clear as day, my choice crystallized in my mind. We could face this together, or I could let the shadows of our past swallow us whole. With a deep breath, I replied, then let's figure this out together. If you trust me, they'll trust you. Josh's face softened, and somewhere in the storm of fear and uncertainty, a spark ignited in his gaze, a fragile promise that flickered away from the dark. Yet as I took the step forward, that shared determination coiling in time, I was snatched back from the brink of hope by the vibrating clang of metal against the floor, a flash of a weapon drawn, and a voice booming out, "Nobody move." In one horrifying moment, everything detonated into chaos again. Bodies surged forward, screams echoed, and instinct drove me into the arms of Eli, who pulled me tight against him, ready to shield me from the chaos. Josh backed away. The fight had shifted in a crushing wave of panic as disparate lives collided in a desperate whirlwind. The officers shouted commands, and threats echoed in the air, building toward an inevitable collision. Fear surged. How much longer could we grasp at threads of connection while everything around us threatened to unravel? Through the barrage, I locked eyes with Maya again, and I saw it clearer than ever, the unity and fragility of our intertwined pasts. This wasn't merely about Josh, it was altogether about life, love, and the connections that bind us unexpectedly, beautifully in chaos. Before I could relay that realization, life hit again, the air suddenly growing taut, thickening as I squeezed Ella's hand and whispered fiercely to him, "We need to find a way out, now." The world constricted around us, pulling taut and waiting to snap. This time, I wouldn't be a spectator, caught in someone else's storm. Together, we would carve our way back to each other, not just for the present but for every moment that preceded and every connection we were yet to find in the chaos of living. And as the storm roared around us, I felt the weight of my choices pulsating anew, the undeniable conclusion that sometimes, reunions don't merely bring back the past but also carve pathways toward fractured futures that may just lead to healing. United in chaos, we would not simply survive, we would thrive in ways none of us could yet foresee. With one last glance at the swirling memories, I steeled myself and pushed forward into the fray, the luminous spark of hope burning brightly amid the tumult, ready to face whatever lay ahead. In this newfound strength, I whispered into the chaos, "Together, always." And for the first time, it felt like the beginning of something indelibly beautiful.